So welcome to our talk tonight. It's Propagating Native Plants with Stanley Gu from Grassroots Ecology. Stanley did a talk for us early last year. So he's a repeat speaker on this subject. He's great. But before I let Stanley start talking, I'm going to first acknowledge that the work done by the Santa Clara Valley chapter of CNPS lies in the homeland of the Ama Mutsun tribal band, the Tamiya Nation, the Ramaya Tusholoni, and the Muwekma Ohlone. We still live and thrive in this area today. We hope to learn from them and support their work to restore traditional practices and heal from historical trauma. And I forgot to introduce myself, actually. I'm Vivian New. I'm one of the co-chairs of our chapter, which is the Santa Clara Valley chapter, and I'm also the nursery manager for our chapter, and more on that in a minute. I am very curious to know if this is your first, whether or not there are any people this is a first talk from our chapter that you've been to, or, oh, so many people. And I'm very curious, how many people learned about it from Meetup? Okay, from an email from us. Okay. And also one last question, how many members here? Oh, excellent. Okay, well, welcome. We're really happy to have you. This is actually, I think, our first talk of the year. So, and our talks are always done by a team. It's not just me and the speaker. So I'm taking care of introducing this. We also have some technology. I am attempting to record this on Zoom. So if all goes well, you'll be able to view it later on Zoom as a recording on our YouTube channel. We have our greeters, Deb Haraki, Kathy Cakebread, and Murad Von Schacht. They're back there at the table. They are giving out free wildflower seeds. So if you haven't had an opportunity to get some, please feel free to go back there afterwards and grab a packet of seeds. And most of all, thank you to our speaker, Stanley. For those of you who are not familiar with CNPS, we're a nonprofit environmental organization that was founded in 1965. We have over 12,000 members. I think it's actually 13,000 members at this point, and 36 chapters. And the significance of that is we are not just a state organization, we are actually international because our 36th chapter is in Baja California. Our chapter is the Santa Clara Valley chapter, so we cover all of Santa Clara Valley, a tiny bit of San Joaquin County, and then southern San Mateo County, up to about San Bruno Mountain. Our mission is to protect South California's native plants and their natural habitats today and into the future. We do that through science, education, stewardship, gardening, and advocacy. If you are not currently a member, although I see that many of you are, we certainly appreciate you joining us. And if you do, you will get not just one, but two fabulous magazines, Artemisia, which is a little bit more of a science-oriented magazine, and then Flora, which has lots of general interest articles, beautiful pictures, a lot of gardening information too. You'll also receive Blazing Star, our chapter newsletter, which tells you about upcoming activities and oh, yes, right. So if you are interested in joining, there is an offer over there that will help you to do that. And you also will receive discounts at participating local nurseries. We have a bunch of events coming up in January. We are a very active chapter. So right now we have an online plant sale going on, and that will go hopefully through the end of tomorrow night. I will have to end it early if we fill all our pickup slots. So if you buy plants from us online right now, and you can go to cnps-scb.org, and there's a link to our nursery, and just go there to buy the plants. You can pick them up at our nursery on Friday or here on Saturday, because we are having a seed and cutting exchange here on Saturday. So there's two opportunities to pick up your plants, and then you can if you come on Saturday, you can get materials to practice some of the stuff you're going to learn about tonight. We also have Year in Pictures coming up. That's on Thursday at the Los Altos Library. That's where members get an opportunity to show their prettiest pictures from 2024. It is a really fun evening. It's also a good place to find out where you might want to go in the state, because some of the people took pictures elsewhere to see wildflowers. We also have lots of work days. We have coming up on Saturday, there's one at Lake Cunningham, one at Cataldi Park, one at Kirk Park, whose leader happens to be sitting Kathy Kleinstarber happens to be sitting in the front row here. We have our seed and cutting exchange, as I mentioned, on Saturday. And then next week, we have on Tuesday here again, we have our native plant ID group, which next week is going to be focused on identifying pictures, plants in pictures. So it'll be, they will be going over different apps and different strategies you can use if you take pictures and later on want to figure out what plant you took a picture of. If you want to find out more about what's coming up, you can always go to our meetup group. And I saw quite a few of you did find out about this through meetup, or make sure, or both actually, get on our chapter news email list where we send out a message once a week to let you know what's coming up. Also, our two big spring activities, save the date. We have our Growing Natives Garden Tour. That's going to be on April 12th and 13th. And so that's our garden tour. It's a free tour, San Mateo County and Santa Clara County, 2 days, because it's a lot of ground to cover and there's a lot of great gardens on it. Our wildflower show will be the last Saturday in April, and that is at West Valley College. And that's where we go out, we gather lots and lots of wildflowers. We've labeled them for you so you can see all these beautiful flowers all together with their names. So it helps a lot with identification, but it's also really pretty. And we'll have a lot of great speakers. John Muir Laws is actually our keynote speaker this year. As I mentioned before, our chapter news email list is an easy way to get a notice once a week of things that are coming up. It's a Google group. Go to cnps-scb.org and there's information about joining. It's or you could just take a picture of this and send an email to that address. And now on to the main. I would like to introduce Stanley Gu. He is he works at the Grassroots Ecology Nursery, but I actually met him many years ago in this very room where he came to our Rare Plant Committee meeting, and he is an amazing propagator, a great guy, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Stanley. Thank you.
Thanks,
All right.
Vivian.
Let me see that. Thanks.
Okay. You see it on your end?
Yes, it looks good.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining today. Quick question. How many of you all have grown anything from seed or from a cutting or anything? Yeah, great. So it looks like there's already a lot of at least some experience. And if you have any thoughts to share your own experiences and tips, I encourage you to at the end in our Q&A and discussion. So yeah, I'll be talking about the basics of propagating native plants at home. As Vivian mentioned, I do work for Grassroots Ecology. So I'll first go over a bit about our organization and our nursery. Then I'll get into setting up your own home nursery facilities. And then we'll cover the two main types of propagation. There's propagation from seed or sexual propagation, and there's clonal or asexual propagation. And then we'll talk about how to upsize and take care of those plants that you've started. All right. So about Grassroots Ecology, we are a nonprofit organization founded in 2016, split off from Actera, which is also an organization in this building. And our goal is to restore habitats throughout the South Bay area, and to engage the community in doing that. And we do that with the help of our amazing native plants. Here are some of the sites that we work at. We're here at the Peninsula Conservation Center, our office. We have a variety of urban demonstration gardens and rain gardens throughout Palo Alto area, stretching up to Redwood City, all the way down to Los Gatos. We've got a lot of different sites. One of our most important sites is our nursery. So that's located right there in Foothills Nature Preserve in Palo Alto. And that's where we grow all of the native plants that we use at our restoration sites throughout this area. I also want to mention that my colleague Shelley Pei has been doing a lot of the work in collaboration with Vivian and other members of CNPS to landscape the Peninsula Conservation Center here, and they're working on a revamp of that landscaping and an awesome demo garden. So come back to see how that's going. Yeah, as Vivian already mentioned, we work on the lands of several indigenous tribes. The Amamutsin, the Ramaytush Ohlone, the Muwekma Ohlone, and the Tamiya Nation. I do want to recognize that these tribes have been here since time immemorial. That's longer than human memory. And they are the original propagators of native plants and caretakers. They use a variety of traditional stewardship practices, including cultural burning, tilling, sowing, a variety of practices that are being revitalized today. I encourage you to go to their websites to learn more. Cool. Now introduce you all to our nursery. This is the Grassroots Ecology Nursery. As I mentioned, it's in Palo Alto's Foothills Nature Preserve. We are primarily a restoration nursery, so we grow for our own restoration projects, but we also grow for other agencies like the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space, other park districts. Since we are focused on restoration, we aren't open for in-person shopping, but we do have online sales that you can pick up at our nursery. And we also attend the CNPS Fall Plant Sale and the Spring Wildflower Show. So that's where you can come see our plants in person. Our nursery is run by a small team. This is our nursery director, Deanna Giuliano. She's been the nursery director since 2006, so almost 20 years. She has decades of experience with propagation and is the former president of the Santa Cruz chapter of CNPS, and still is a very active member of that chapter. She has a degree in environmental studies and biology from UC Santa Cruz. And everything I've learned today is stuff I've learned from Deanna over the past 2.5 years or so, working at the Grassroots Ecology Nursery. I also work with Sienna Watson, who's another ecologist at Grassroots Ecology. And yeah, she takes care of a lot of the propagation tasks as well and does a lot of seed collection at our nursery. And I also want to recognize our amazing team of AmeriCorps members. We have 2 AmeriCorps programs, the California Climate Action Corps and the Watershed Stewards Program. And these fellows are serving a year-long program with us and helping out at the nursery once a week. Over many years, we've had countless staff and volunteers and AmeriCorps members helping us out at the nursery, and the work we do could not be possible without them. So as a restoration nursery, we focus on locally sourced native plants. That means plants collected from the region, the Bay Area region, and specifically local watersheds. Why that's important for restoration is that locally sourced plants are adapted to the local environment. So there's microclimates, there's a lot of hidden diversity even within a single species. So as an example, we have blue-eyed grass here, and even though they're not necessarily different named varieties or subspecies, there's still differences between plants as close by as the East Bay versus in the Santa Cruz Mountains. The ones closer to the coast might be lower growing or have fleshier stems, taking advantage of that coastal fog. So as a restoration nursery, we really like to focus on those local plants. As gardeners, you have a choice. You can definitely you don't have to necessarily use those locally sourced plants if you are, say, in an urban area, or our urban sites are often highly modified compared to these natural spaces. But we do still like to encourage people to use these local plants where they can and help preserve some of these unique ecotypes and that genetic diversity that's so unique to our region. So a little bit about our nursery history. We were founded before Grassroots Ecology was actually an organization in 1997. This was in a backyard in one of our supporters' backyards. And it was mainly to grow plants for the San Francisco Creek and a Rastrojera Preserve projects in Palo Alto. Then in 2003, we moved to Foothills Nature Preserve, our current location. I also want to highlight in 2016 was a big year for phytosanitary practices. That means practices to keep plants clean and safe from plant diseases, which I'll get into in a bit. So yeah, in summary, we grow locally native plants according to phytosanitary protocols. And I also encourage you to get involved with us. We do a lot of volunteer work days at our restoration sites, and there's our website if you want to learn more. All right, so let's get into setting up a nursery at home. So I'll first talk a little bit about disease prevention, and then we'll get into nursery supplies, some examples of home nurseries, and how to find plant material. So I mentioned plants are susceptible to infection from various pathogens, and fungi or fungus-like pathogens, such as Phytophthora, are a huge concern. So Phytophthora especially includes a variety of diseases, including sudden oak death. These diseases can weaken or even kill your seedlings. So you really want to pay attention to improve your success rate. But they can also affect mature plants. And a really big concern is those diseases spreading from our nurseries and horticultural trade into those wild or natural spaces. So we want to do our best, especially as a restoration nursery, to avoid introducing those things into nature. As a urban gardener or a home gardener, you might not be as concerned necessarily if you're not bringing plants into a natural space, but it's always good to keep in mind for the success of your own plants at home. So yeah, getting into disease prevention, we have a variety of sanitation options. We often use isopropyl alcohol spray at our nursery to just quickly disinfect things, like our tools or gloves. We also use bleach, sodium hypochlorite, just like your household bleach that you can get. And we dilute it to 0.5%. So you can usually get it in like 5 or 7% at the store. So you just want to dilute it 1 to 10 and 1 to 13 to get it down to that dilution. And it's great for just sanitizing large batches of plants and removing any potential pathogens on their surfaces. Be aware if you're using these chemicals to protect your skin and eyes. Wear goggles and gloves, and just, they can be very irritating. And then the other sanitation option is heat. So at our nursery, we steam our soil to 140 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 minutes. That might not be as practical at home, so we'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah, so when we think about plant diseases in our nursery, we start with clean plant material and clean potting mix, tools, and pots. And we also isolate our plants from potential sources of disease and monitor them. So when collecting plant material, you want to look for stuff that looks healthy. So that's pretty obvious. We also like to collect higher up from the ground where possible, just so that it doesn't collect any pathogens from that splashback from the ground. And generally speaking, seeds are a lower risk than cuttings, just because they are in that reproductive part of the plant. And yeah, we tend to disinfect a lot of the things that we bring into the nursery. So cuttings, as well as seed that's like collected near the ground, using bleach. Next up is the clean potting mix. So some things are higher risk than others. Soil dug up from your garden or from your compost pile might contain a lot of fungi, beneficial or otherwise. So at our nursery, we actually use a soil-less potting mix. And that just means it doesn't have like a natural soil or compost in it. She'll talk about. So generally speaking, if you buy your mix from a store, I wouldn't be too worried. You can also make your own mix at home and heat treat it with these other methods like a solar oven or like a homemade steamer, but it's really not usually necessary, I would say. And then, yeah, keeping all your pots and tools clean. We reuse all of our pots. And before we reuse them, we will scrub them off and soak them in bleach for a minute. Then rinse them off and they're good to use. Yeah, and then isolating your plants. So you want to be aware of like bringing in dirty materials into your plant storage space. We like to lift all our plants up off the ground. That just prevents them from, getting diseases carried directly through the soil into the pots, and also prevents the splashback from the ground surface. And of course, if you see diseased plants or plants covered in pests like aphids or things, you can discard them or separate them from your other plants. For monitoring at home, I would recommend just visually inspecting, as I said. We also do a special type of testing at our nursery for Phytophthora and certain other diseases called pear baiting. Just a fun little fact, they get attracted to the pear and then form lesions that you can inspect, but that's kind of beyond what you would probably want to do at home. All right, so let's get into some of the supplies now. So of course, you'll first need a potting mix and growing mixes. At our nursery, we primarily use these three things. Our potting mix has a base of shredded redwood bark, and that kind of creates a porous environment that's really good at draining, but also holding just enough moisture for those young plants. You might see a lot of commercial potting mixes use peat, which is also an option, though it's not quite as sustainable since peat bogs aren't really a renewable resource.
Stanley,
Yeah,
will you provide the slides for me to upload? Because
Yeah.
everybody's taking pictures.
yeah. The slides will be available afterwards.
Thanks.
And then we also use composted turkey manure. So this is a just turkey manure, and it is treated at high heat, and it just has kind of a slow release fertilizer for the plants. And then perlite and lava rock, these are just kind of very porous rocky material that add drainage and air access to those roots. And then our seed starting mix is over here. We use peat in small amounts because seed starting mix we don't need as much of. And then we add vermiculite and perlite, which create a very nice and loamy material with small particle size. It's not gonna bury our plants with huge chunks of bark or something like that. And then finally our cutting mix, for those cones, we use perlite and a little bit of peat. That just keeps it really well draining, so that our cuttings don't rot. Where to buy your growing mixes? Of course, you can, there's a lot of good options for bagged mixes, such as Sunshine Mix, at the store. I also like to go to landscape material stores like Lingso. Disclaimer, we are sponsored by Lingso. They do donate a lot of our soil. But I really love going there for my own garden too, because you can fill up your own bin and just get whatever you need. And then also there's the option to make your own mix at home, though you have to be more cautious about where you're sourcing and the potential for disease.
Where do you get the sunshine mix?
I think you can get those at like garden centers, hardware store garden centers, yeah. Never seen
You've
that?
seen it.
Okay, it might be some specialty stores, but
The Ace Hardware in Palo Alto, and you can also get it at Home Depot. It's not always in stock there, but what I usually do is I order it online and it's loaded into the car. You just drive up there, and it, somebody will bring it to you and stick it in your car.
cool, yeah, so for the recording, Vivian was just saying that the sunshine mix is often at Ace Hardware or Home Depot, or you can order online to deliver to Ace. Yeah. And then for pots, any container will do as long as it has holes in the bottom for drainage. I wouldn't worry too much about the precise container you're using. But I can show you all what we use at our nursery. We use these, they're called Anderson bands, because they have this band pattern at the bottom. And you can see they have really huge drainage holes, and these are actually to encourage air pruning. So what happens is that, as you can see in this photo, the roots are directed towards the bottom of the pot by the square shape, so they're not going to circle around and become root bound like you often see in the round pots. And then when they hit the bottom, they hit that air, and then they can sense that and basically just stop growing. And so that creates a healthy root structure. That isn't going to be really like full of roots in the pot that you sometimes see when you get a plant. But honestly, I wouldn't go out of your way to buy these pots. If you're just getting started, just use any old container and stick some big holes in the bottom. Yeah, and then we also have other containers we use for seed starting. Of course, we got these commonly used plug cells. These are great, especially for like veggies or annuals and things. They can just pop up straight from this little pot into the ground. We also like to use seed flats. So I like to just use these tofu containers at home because they're really great depth and you can fit a lot of seeds in here. And what happens is basically the seeds kind of. So here's a seed flat with a few seedlings left in it. They basically just spread their roots throughout this flat, and then you can, that gives them more time that they're able to grow in this little flat, because they just have more room to grow, even though they're overlapping. Whereas in the plug cells, you can't keep them in there forever, or as long as with these flats. So yeah, I just like to use this, and then I'll show you all how to upsize a plant from a flat later on. All right,
What kind of holes do you have with the container?
sorry.
What kind of holes do you have with the container?
Oh, yeah, let me show you. We'll make pretty big holes. I kind of, you can see that. The soil, when it's wet, it kind of sticks together, so you don't have to worry about it like all coming out through the bottom when you water. Yeah, don't be afraid of making big drainage holes.
What's your trick for making the holes in there?
My trick, I used an X-Acto knife. So that's a little easier. You can also try scissors, but just be really careful. Yeah. And then watering your plants. At our nursery, we use a combination of the sprinklers and hand watering. Even though these are native plants that are often adapted to summer drought, in the containers, they dry out really quickly. They don't have access to that deep groundwater, so you're gonna have to water them pretty often, probably more than you think. Especially in the hotter summer season, you might have to be watering them like every day through a heat wave, for example. Yeah. And then other basic tools, gloves to protect your hands, plant labels, and we also like to use chopsticks to kind of pick out little plants. Or some other thin stick And then growing areas, you'll need a place to put your plants, of course. At our nursery, we have the shade houses, so those are basically covered with a shade cloth that lets in anywhere from like 30 to 50% of the light. And that creates a more kind of like a dappled shade environment that is not gonna stress out our plants during those summer heat waves and those intense periods of sunlight. At home, you can kind of use any material that you can find. They do sell shade cloth at hardware stores, or you could use like even landscape fabric or the shade of a tree, something like that. Yeah, dappled shade works best. And then for your we also use greenhouses, of course, to start our young plants, especially early in the year when it's cold in the winter. They need that extra boost of warmth. And then a potting area that's clean, ergonomic for you to work on. One other thing about the greenhouses, you don't have to build a whole greenhouse in your backyard. You can basically just use any old like plastic dome, or let's see if I have one.
An umbrella.
An umbrella. Maybe a clear one, yeah. Or like this turkey, I don't know, that you find at Costco. This works too for like making a mini greenhouse. Just poke some holes through the top so it doesn't get overly humid. Yeah, so there's a lot of options out there for getting started. Yeah. And yeah, now let's get into some home nursery setups. So this is my home nursery setup. I just have a table there to lift my plants off the ground. And I've covered it with some shade cloth on top. You can see I've got a variety of containers throughout this area, very easy to set up. And then here's Sienna's home setup. She's put it under a tree and elevated it. And then she also gets like squirrels and other things trying to eat her plants. So she's put like a wire mesh to protect that. And yeah, one thing I do like about the square pots is that you can fit a lot of them in one area. They fit together really well, so you can grow more plants in a small space. And Sienna's done that for some of her plants. Yeah, so you can see there's a lot of the square pots and those seed plots I was talking about. You can even grow like multiple seeds. Oops, sorry. You can even grow multiple seeds in one seed plat. So you've got a diversity there. Here's another example of a former AmeriCorps member who has a stacked setup to save space. One challenge with this is that it can get kind of dark on the bottom of your little nursery. So yeah, just be aware of the light availability. But yeah, she's propagated hundreds of plants for her apartment project using just this little setup here. And then finally, I want to highlight Shelly's nursery. So Shelly is the staff member who works, who's done a lot of the work around here at the PCC. And she's got set up here on some crates in the shade of a shrub. Since it's not as elevated, she does face challenges with slugs coming in. But one great thing about Shelly's setup is she's really saved money in terms of she's making her own compost and soil mix. So yeah, that's a great way to save money if you want to. She also has a really beautiful mature garden that she collects all her materials from for free. And then she's got rain barrels as well. So that really helps keep down her water costs. And from Shelly, she says her annual costs are less than $150 a year, which is pretty cool. And yeah, this is her cutting setup and her seed flat. You can see she's also fit a lot of different seedlings and species in one flat. All right, so yeah, in summary, there's a lot of different ways you can set up your home nursery. Just use what you can find. And as predation happens, manage for that and find different creative ways to exclude those predators of your plants. And then, yeah, there's no perfect nursery setup. So my advice is just to get started and don't worry too much about the details. Okay, now let's get into gathering plant materials. So as I mentioned, there's seed and clonal propagation. So for seed propagation, obviously we're collecting seeds and fruits. And clonal propagation is through things like cuttings, folds, divisions. Oops. So where can you find these materials? As Vivian mentioned, there's the seed and cutting exchanges that CNPS puts on. You can also look in many nurseries do sell seeds as well and in online stores. Our nursery doesn't sell seeds, but you can find many that do. And another option is to kind of see the gardens around you, maybe have friends with a mature garden. And yeah, there's also wild collection, but let me get into the ethics of wild collection. So if you do try to collect from a nature preserve or a park, be aware that legally speaking, you do need to have permission from the owner of that land, whether it's public or private, in order to collect from someone else's land. And then ethically speaking, it's important not to damage those populations that we're harvesting from by over harvesting. So only harvest from stands of, healthy populations with many individuals, and then don't take too many of the available seeds. One rule of thumb is 5%. But yeah, it's just make sure you don't over collect. And then when you're collecting for your garden, it's great to have genetic diversity. When we're doing restoration, we try to collect from as many individuals as possible to get those different adaptations to different conditions. And so you're not inbreeding your plants. If you're growing plants just for your garden, maybe you're only wanting to grow 1 or 2 plants in, so that's not as huge of a concern. But do note that some species might require cross-pollination to produce seeds in the future. Cool. So as in summary, setting up your nursery, just keep cleanliness, phytosanitary practices in mind, and be creative with your supplies. And yeah, there's many sources of plant material that you can use. We have a question.
You mentioned spraying the plant materials with a diluted bleach solution.
Yeah.
That doesn't hurt the plants? I'm curious. It sounds like it doesn't, but I just wanted to confirm. Are there plants you shouldn't do that with?
Not that I'm aware of. I think a lot of plants surprisingly can tolerate that. It's pretty dilute, so it's not gonna be like straight from that container. And yeah, you only soak it in there for 1 minute and then it should be fine, and then you rinse it off. Yeah, in water. Okay, we have a few more questions.
Well, yeah, just follow up on that to understand, do you wash the soil off of the roots as well? So
Yeah, so first you wanna clean off any debris or soil. Just rinse all of that off first, and then you can bleach it. I wouldn't say it's necessary to do that unless you're like really concerned about spreading a disease to somewhere else. But that is a big concern at our nursery for restoration.
My previous experience, I found out you get better drainage of the water using a little bit of gravel at the bottom. Do you recommend that?
Gravel like underneath your nursery setup, or?
Gravel at the bottom where you have that hole.
Oh, I see. I don't think it's necessary to do that. We don't ever do that in our pots. Yeah, just because it's opening straight to the air. So yeah, we don't find that to be an issue, but if it works for you, that's great. Yeah, just do what works. Yeah.
What's the best time to
start by cuttings and start by seeds?
Yeah, so cuttings and seeds, it really depends on the species. I'll get into that in a bit and I'll, cover that in the next section.
Another question. So when you were talking about the potting mix and you have shredded redwood. So I thought that the smallest shredded redwood that they have at Lingzo, but it's still, there's these big pieces. So do you guys have any tips on how to, make it finer than, because it's really kind of
Chunky, right?
yeah, and I kind of struggle. I try to like almost grate it. And whatever's left over, I'll put as mulch in the garden, but what
I
do you
see.
guys do? Do you do anything about that?
I think they sift it for us, like with a big sifter. Yeah, we
You
don't,
guys are such a big, I mean, yeah, I
Yeah.
do the shoveling, help yourself, and then it's like these big pieces.
oh, yeah. Yeah, if you're growing like small seedlings, you might want to sift it in like a mesh with the wide holes in it. Just to get rid of those really big chunks.
Yeah, then it's so chunky, it's like hair, it's like almost like the gorilla hair,
Right, it's
yeah,
creamy.
yeah, and I just sifted to get, it's hard to get that 50%, like, that you try to get for your potting mix, it's
Yeah,
kind of hard.
yeah.
But you guys, yeah, I guess you're you're big enough that they can just, you can kind of order it the way you want it.
Yeah, yeah. At home, I recommend just trying the sifting if you can. All right.
Oh, I have one more question. Do you ever use heat mats for any of your propagating?
Yeah, so when we're doing cuttings, I can talk about that.
Okay,
Yeah, we do
okay.
put them on heat mats for a bit. Yeah, so let's get into seed propagation. So yeah, first when you're collecting your seed, you need to familiarize yourself with what that seed looks like. Here's some great resources for that. iNaturalist and the California Botanic Garden. Or you can just search in there the seed pod and see if you can find it. Usually it's pretty obvious. And there's a couple different types of fruits or seed bearing structures. So there's the dry kinds, the fleshy ones like berries or berry-like fruits, and then nuts as well. Generally speaking, dry seeds can be stored longer. There's exceptions to that. And then the fleshy fruits or the nuts you'll usually want to treat those more quickly within the same growing season. And then, we can talk a bit about timing for seeds. So you want to collect them when they're ripe, of course. And color is usually the best indicator. So you can see in the spring beauties on the right or on your left, they change color from brown to really shiny black. And then of course blackberries will turn black, and then a lot of the nuts like acorns and buckeyes will turn from green or pale to brown. And then that's when you'll know they're ready. Oftentimes it's hard to collect like right when the seeds are ripe. So some people like to put a bag around the seed head. You can also check out these graphs from online. iNaturalist has these phenology graphs that can help you figure out when things will be fruiting. And then let's get into cleaning seeds. So cleaning seeds involves just removing the outer layers of that seed, and that helps you make it easier to sow the seed and also reduces the likelihood of rotting and just that outer husk molding on you. So I'll demonstrate with some dry seed right here. The first step is to really let it dry out. And so that you don't have excess moisture in your seed. And then I'm going to use this little mat here for my demo. All right. Let's see. So I've got some coyote mint seed here. Can you see me in the video? Okay, great. So you can see we just harvest the whole seed head and it's dried up. You can kind of look inside, break
Yeah.
them.
Can you
Yeah.
stop the share, because I think it's still focusing more with the windows now. Yes, perfect. Thank
Okay,
you.
great. So yeah, you can look inside to see where the seed is, see if you can identify it. I can see there's, probably can't see it from where you are. They're very tiny and brown or dark brown, oblong shapes in here that are the seed. And so the first step is to release them from the, dried flowers. So we like to crush them, so I'm just gonna crush these. This device. But you can use anything like I like old PVC pipes, are nice, or, yeah. Kitchen tools are often great for seed cleaning. Let's really get that nice and crushed up. Usually seeds are quite resilient to the crushing. There's some seeds that you want to be careful of not crushing the actual seeds itself. But in general, they're pretty resilient and they'll just, it'll just be the dry husks that get crushed. So that's on this side. Yeah, so I can see the little brown seeds falling into the cracks here. Smells really nice. Cloudy mint. Smell here. All right. It's a little dusty too. And then you can kind of collect that crushed material. So I'm gonna brush it into my little pan here. Let's get that together. All right, let's bring this pan. Okay, so at this point, you just get this mass of crushed plant material. This off to the side. At this point, there's two main methods to separating the seed out. There's sifting and winnowing. So let's see, with sifting, you just get like yet another kitchen device. Little sieves, and you can either go for one that's like the holes are larger than your seed or smaller. So you want to separate out the stuff that's smaller or larger than your seed. So these holes are definitely going to be larger than the seed. So the seed is going to fall through there. And then I'm left with kind of just a fine mixture of seed and chaff. And then the bigger pieces are discarded. So I'll just put them here. All right. At this point, I might these back into the pan. And you can see it's already kind of forming this dust. And I might try to winnow it now. And winnowing is kind of just blowing away the lighter material. So you can use your own breath, or if there's wind, you're doing this outside, and then you can, oh. Yeah. So that's all the lighter material that's blowing away, and then the seed will be is generally heavier unless you're doing like dandelion seed or something, which is obviously going to blow away, but generally seeds are heavier than the chaff. All right, so then you end up with like this kind of mixture of seed and some of the heavier chaff, but I'd say this is pretty good to sow. Like you don't have to get it to be perfect, it's just so that you don't have an excess amount of chaff. Another method I like is kind of just to drop it into your pan, and then the heavier material will drop straight down, and then the other stuff will blow farther away. Like that. So yeah, there's a variety of methods. But generally just go back and forth between sifting and winnowing until you get it to be clean. It's pretty fun and it smells good. All right. So let me share my presentation again. All right. So for fleshy, I'll probably have to go straight back to that. So for fleshy fruits here, I've got some snowberry. And yeah, it's a similar process just with water. So you first start off by crushing the seed yet again. So you really want to crush it and mash it into a pulp. You can do this straight in the Ziploc bag. Really mash it and get those skins and juices into like a fine consistency. And I can already see there's some seeds like revealing themselves in here. Kind of looks like a smoothie. Cucumber smoothie. But don't eat this because snowberries are not edible for humans. If you do have an edible seed, you could just eat them and spit out the seeds, but yeah, sometimes we do that at the nursery. All right, so I crushed about half of this. Just get my gloves out. And then the next step is, oh yeah, let me stop sharing this so that people can see. So yeah, crush the seed up, mashed it into a pulp. And the next step, you can use one of these sieves as long as want the hole size, the mesh size to be smaller than your seed, so the seed doesn't fall through. Now I'm gonna grab some of this pulp and just put it in this bowl of water here. All right, so I've got this bowl of water with my sieve. And at this point, you kind of just continue the mashing process with your hands. So you'll keep pressing the pulp until it's really finely disintegrated, and then it'll pass through the sieve. All that fleshy material will disintegrate in the water. Just keep at this. You can see it's already showing up more and more seed. They're little white like cucumber seeds almost in there. And the flesh is slowly disintegrating, turning this water into a nice lovely shade of yellow. Nice. As you can see, it's not perfect. You might want to do this a bit longer. Another thing you can do is seeds often will sink, and then you'll get like a layer of flesh floating to the top, and you can decant that flesh off and keep the heavier seeds down below. That's another method. Yeah, did we have a question in the back? Yeah, you could definitely do that, like if you wanted to do them individually. If you don't have a lot of seed, that's probably the easiest. Yeah. If you have like a whole bag of seed, that might take a lot longer, so we like to do this method at the nursery. But yeah, we like to also disinfect the seeds, so once we've got it to a slightly cleaner state, you can see there's some seeds in there. Then we'll dip this in the diluted bleach for a minute. And then, yeah, then we'll rinse off the seed, as I mentioned. And then go on to the seed treatment or sowing steps, which I'll talk about.
Stanley,
Yeah.
is hydrogen peroxide another agent that you might use to sterilize?
We don't use that at our nursery, so I'm not
Okay.
really familiar with that, but yeah, there's also a lot of other disinfectant agents out there for sure. Yeah. All right, let me share.
Question about that?
Yeah,
So, do you ever just soak the seeds and let them just soak and then let that, healthy seeds like that? I know with tomatoes, they'll often just soak them and then they'll ferment. And then after maybe 4 to 5 days, then you just have kind of clean seeds. Do you ever do that?
we generally just mash until, yeah, they're good to go. But you could try that for sure, yeah. I haven't tried that personally.
Honeysuckle is also a fleshy, they
Right,
have that gelatinous substance around it, and I
Right.
did it like tomato seeds, and I just.
yeah, that's
did
a
it
really
in
great tip.
glass container in the kitchen, and after a couple days, it kind of gets kind of mucky, and you kind of clean it off and put fresh and just stir it up.
Right,
And eventually the fleshy material gets away from the seed, and then you just have a clean seed, but. Yeah.
yeah, that's a really good idea too.
Yeah,
I think
it's
that's also a
really
great
low
option.
maintenance way to do it.
Yeah, if you don't want to be mashing all day. That's a great tip, thanks. All right, let me share my presentation again. Oh, it's already still up there.
No, but it won't be
Oh,
on.
I see on there, okay. I'm getting Zoom confusion. All right. So yeah, acorns, other nuts are pretty simple. You just remove the husks and then we like to disinfect them as well. So yeah, on to the next step of seed treatment. So seeds, there's certain species that require an additional step beyond the cleaning. So I'm gonna highlight 2 of the most common types of treatment. Cold stratification is basically putting your seeds in a cold, moist environment for a few months. And that simulates the winter conditions. So a lot of native plants, since we are in a summer dry climate, which is pretty rare, they don't want to germinate at the first sign of rain. Like maybe they've dropped their seeds in May or something. And then there's like a really late rain. They don't want to germinate right away, or they don't want to germinate the first rain, and then die when it's super cold and chilly. So they require a period of that cold temperature, to, kind of disintegrate any inhibitory chemicals that prevent them from germinating. So you're basically just mimicking those cold, wet conditions of a winter. And to do that, we put our seeds in a little plastic baggie, seeds that we've cleaned, disinfected. We mix it with a bit of, you could use like the seed starting mix or just a bit of perlite if you have larger seeds. And then mist it, let it be a little bit moist, like a squeezed out sponge. And then put it in the fridge. And then you want to look up, there's seed protocols. I'll share some resources for how many months to put that in the fridge for. And then if you see the seeds starting to germinate, you'll want to sow them right away. Otherwise, you just wait until the designated period to sow. Yeah, and that just helps improve germination for a lot of species. Another treatment is acid. So a lot of fruits that are eaten by birds, So things like elderberries or honeysuckles that we mentioned, they like to have their seed coat broken down by acid. And at our nursery, a lot of nurseries do use like sulfuric acid or more scary chemicals, but you can also just use coffee, like instant coffee, and just soak it overnight in that. And then, yeah, and then you can go on to your next step. Sometimes they require the acid and the cold stratification, so you can do those one after another. So here's some resources for finding those treatment protocols. I really like the book Seed Propagation by Dara Emery, which
We have it back there.
yeah, is available back there. A lot of the information is also available on Calscape. If you go on to the plant profile of the species you're growing, they often have a propagation section. So this one says to do 2 to 2.5 months of cold stratification to improve germination, or you could try no treatment, but just have slightly lower germination rates. And then, yeah, there's a bunch of other resources right there for you if you need more protocols. And then after you've cleaned and treated your seed, you want to sow it. So one option is to direct sow in the ground, but that's quick, but you're going to have a lot of die-off and predation. So we like to sow into plugs or flats. As I mentioned, plugs, they only have a small space to grow, so you'll have to plant them in the ground or upsize them to a larger pot relatively sooner. Whereas flats, you can keep them for a bit longer. We've had plants sitting in flats sometimes for more than a year. But yeah, those are various options. And when you sow it, different seeds have different requirements. So you'll spread the seed evenly on the soil surface. Some seeds like to have light. So if it says that in your protocol for propagation, then you don't want to cover it too thickly with soil. But generally speaking, a rule of thumb is to cover it at a depth of 1/2 to 1 times the width of the seed. And then you'll want to keep the seed, your seed flats or plugs watered, and they should germinate within a few weeks. Obviously that depends on the species. Some species take quite a while to germinate, whereas others come up within a few days. And then from there, you'll get a bunch of these seedlings that you can then upsize, which I'll talk about later. Yeah, so in summary, pay attention to the seed ripeness when you're collecting, and then look up those protocols for what your seed needs, and then follow those for the treatment and sowing steps. Alrighty. So next up is, yeah.
So, instead of doing the treatment, is it also an option to just put the seed out during the normal time that the seed would be dropping and then just let it naturally propagate?
Yeah, you certainly can do that. So like you could sow the seed in a flat and then
Right.
leave it outdoors.
Yeah,
If you do that though, it might take quite a while and it's not going to be predictable. So you might get a flush of seedlings after like 2 months and then another flush after like another set of months. So just doing that extra treatment step helps make it more predictable and consistent. So yeah, it's not necessary. You could always try like one batch without treatment, one batch
because
with.
it does seem to take a long time if you're keeping it in the fridge for 1 or 2 months anyway.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It just helps you get more consistency, I guess. Yeah.
And if you buy seed, is it likely that you need to do the same types of preparation, or are some of them already, say, for instance, acid treated?
Generally, I don't think they would have treated your seed. Yeah, just because after treatment, you usually have to sow it right away.
Right.
It's been starting to break down the seed coat. Yeah.
Does
doing all the preparation have any effect on how healthy the plant's gonna be or not particularly?
I wouldn't say so. Yeah, at that stage, it's
Fertility.
not gonna be affected later on. Yeah. One thing that could happen is you could like select for certain varieties that favor a particular like propagation method, but I wouldn't be too concerned about that. Yeah. All right, so next up, we're gonna cover clonal or asexual propagation. So I'm gonna cover specifically cuttings and divisions. There's a lot of other types of clonal propagation. But just cover these two types. So the simplest form of taking cuttings, you just cut a stem of a plant and stick it in the ground, basically. And this works great with species like willows or cottonwoods, things that are riparian, or a lot of woodland plants too, thimbleberry, this works well with. And to do this, you basically just select a branch. For willows, we usually like to select branches that are about 1 inch in diameter, relatively young growth. And then we cut about 1.5 feet of length, and then hammer it into the ground with the right side pointing down, into a place that is kind of wet and conducive to willows. And then, yeah, we do this during the rainy season. So right around now is a great time to do this. And don't be afraid to experiment with different plants. Like you might be surprised with what can survive just by staking in the ground. Cuttings also work great with a lot of spreading ground covers. So here's some examples. Yerba buena, a lot of our native strawberries, which form runners, Dutchman's pipe, and honeysuckle. So I'm going to demonstrate how you might take cuttings from a ground cover like a strawberry or yerba buena. So I have here some strawberry runners that I've collected from home. Yeah, stop sharing. So the strawberry runners, they kind of grow out from the plant along the ground. So this is what they look like. And they have these little plantlets at their nodes, and these naturally will root into the ground. You can see this one is already making roots right there. So I'm just gonna untangle these. And this is woodland strawberry, which works really well with doing these sort of cuttings. And I'm gonna use my little Costco thing. So I've got this thing with some holes in it for drainage. I'm gonna fill this up with some soil. Just a nice layer at the bottom here. There we go. And I'm gonna lay these plant runners across the soil so that the those little plantlets, those nodes where the leaves are coming out of, have good contact with the soil. So I'm gonna really put them in contact and kind of stick them in. If they're exposed to air, then they might kind of just rot and die. And you'll inevitably get a few of those that don't succeed, which is totally normal. But these runners I have disinfected already, and that helps improve the success rate, just reducing the likelihood of rotting. So yeah, I'm laying these down. Be kind of casual about it. Stick them in. And then I'll cover it with a bit more soil just to really get those in contact with the soil surface. And you don't want to bury them completely. But I'm just gonna cover some of the stems so they stay down. Like so. So it's kind of like half a buried situation there. And then I'll just water this over the top. And then you can keep it in a humid and cool environment for a few weeks until they start rooting. So I might cover this with my little container. If I'm putting this outside, I'll try to pick a spot that's pretty shady. Or I might even put like a layer of like newspaper even or cloth above it just to keep it especially cool in the first few days. Just because they are pretty vulnerable to wilting when they right when they've been cut from the plant. So yeah, hopefully that works. I'll keep this in my little shade house for the next couple weeks. Share again. All right. So yeah, and then eventually it depends on the species, how quickly they root. The strawberries root pretty quickly, I would say, in a month even, especially if it's warm. And then you can check underneath to see if the roots are starting to poke out. Once they've rooted, you take them out of the flat and you can start separating them. And I'll show you all kind of how we upsize plants into a pot. So onto cuttings. So here's some species that, onto woody shrubs. So here's some woody shrubs that work well with cuttings. Sages especially are great, but there's a variety here. So first you want to choose a branch that is pretty nice and healthy, and you want to look for the current year's growth. So you can see there's some older growth on the bottom, but we're going to choose some of the younger material that is maybe like a few months old. It's not like super young so that it's really soft still, but it's in that intermediate stage. That's ideal. And then you'll want to make sure it has a bunch of nodes. So a node is where the leaves come out of, as I mentioned. So you can see there's a bunch here. And then we like to disinfect these as well, the method I talked about. And that helps reduce the rotting. And then let me get my clippers out. So you'll want to find at least 2 nodes, preferably more. And then for the bottom node, you'll cut right at the node at an angle. So you can see it's a little specky point there. And that's where the roots are going to start growing. So you'll want to also remove the leaves from those nodes. And ideally you want to have at least 1 node below the surface of your potting, of your cutting mix. But yeah, 2 would be even better. And then up above, you can have 1 or 2 nodes of leaves as well. And we don't want to have too many leaves just because there's no roots on this and it's not going to support all that foliage. Plants are always releasing water from their leaves, so we don't want it to dry out. I'm just going to cut off like the top part of this. So there's 2 nodes of leaves. Some people even like to cut the leaves in half or to remove some of them, which you can certainly do. So here's a cutting. Yeah, so at the bottom angled, and then at the top, just a few leaves there. Let's see, another option is to do like what's called a heel cutting. So what that is basically you get a branch that's coming off the main branch, and then you kind of just break it off to make a heel right there. So that's a nice place that often will root. This is maybe a bit on the small side, but Yeah, you can do that as well if you have a branching structure in your plant. You can get a lot of these side branches to root as well. So here's my cutting, and then you've got a bunch of these. Then you'll want to dip it in some rooting hormone. So at our nursery, we like to use Dip and Grow. It's a liquid version. There's also powders. So I'm gonna show you all one with a powder. So for the Dip and Grow, if you just follow the instructions on the package, it'll tell you how much to dilute it. And then you dip it in there for about 10 seconds or so. And then this one is a brand that is a powder. So this is called Root Boost. Generally, our nursery likes to use the liquid ones. Deanna's found those work better. But I'll demonstrate with the powder today. So basically you just wet the bottom of your cutting. Those nodes that you want to stick underneath the surface of your cutting mix. And then you'll dip it in that powdered rooting hormone. It's gonna cover it with that powder. It's got plant hormones that encourage rooting. And then you kind of just shake off the excess. So there you go. And then I've got a flat of perlite. Here you can mix in a little bit of heat or even potting mix if you wanted to. And you just stick them in to the bottom there. Very easy. And this is great to do like even around now, before the plants have really started pushing out a lot of new growth. In the dormant season, it's cool. And yeah, they won't get too stressed out at this time either. So you can put them in your cutting mix like so. Keep this watered. And then we do often put these on heat mats just to keep them from freezing or getting too cold, and that encourages a bit of root growth as well. And then after a few months, you'll get roots coming out at the bottom of your cuttings. Yeah, question.
The dip and grow, because I've heard people tell me you just dip the end of it. But you're saying you dip the whole, make sure all the nodes are in contact with the dip and grow?
Yeah,
Or just the end of it?
you don't have to dip, you're not dipping the whole plant, just like
No, I mean
nodes
the
you
node, you want all the nodes dipped in, or just the end of the tip of the? where
I
you
would
cut
say
it?
the nodes that you want to root. So if you
Okay.
have 2 nodes, then you can try to dip more of them in. But they'll also soak up and go up the stem.
Okay, and how long do you put it in the liquid dip and grow?
I
How
would
long do you leave it?
I would say like 10 to 20 seconds.
Okay,
Yeah, just so it
thanks.
absorbs. Yeah.
Are there any like resources that sort of list which plants are likely to be successful with cuttings?
So some of the propagation resources for seed will also have protocols for cutting. So on Cowscape, for example, they'll often say whether things are good for cuttings or not. Yeah.
You said you can do it on, you wanna do it on new growth, but if you're cutting at a time of year and the only new growth is somewhat woody, will it still work?
If it's very woody, it's probably not gonna work very well. But if you do have like the current year's growth, like the past 12 months or so, then it should be fine. Yeah.
And I read somewhere that if it's woody, you can try scraping off the surface, does that one?
I don't know. I haven't tried that much myself, but yeah, I would try to go for like a few months old. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Helen Popper's book, Month by Month, Gardening in California, she gave a talk for CNPS last year, I think. It has a lot of propagating information of when to propagate various things throughout, throughout the various months. And at the end of the book, before the index, there's a single page that lists like a calendar of propagating a lot of these shrubs. So it's super helpful.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, that's a great resource. Is that on sale in the back? I kind of know.
Maybe we still have one back there? What do we call it? Popper book, the Popper book. We only had one copy of it. So there, there's one copy left, if anybody wants to buy
And
it.
also order online.
Yes, it is available
There's
online.
fun libraries too.
Yeah.
What about the manzanita?
Yeah. There's different kinds of manzanitas that I would say, I think Deanna propagates a lot of manzanitas by cuttings. Some of them are easier than others. I think there's like burl forming ones that can be harder, but the non-burl formers are usually easier with cuttings, but yeah, I've done some manzanitas at home as well. Yeah,
Like Dr. Bird?
You can do that with some kinds.
Yeah.
We do that.
yeah. Deanna's done a lot of different species from manzanita from cuttings, and they can be harder from seed, so cuttings are a great way to do that.
And how long did you say it takes to actually root? generally?
That varies by species. A lot of the sages can root within like a month. They're very quick. The manzanitas can be slower, so they might take like 3 months or even 4 or 5 months to really be ready for upsizing. Yeah.
Well, how do you know when it's really the speed coming on?
Yeah. Yeah, you can definitely take one out and just see, or a couple out. Sometimes you'll have like a few, not all of them will root. So you can take a couple out, or you can look underneath the pot to see if roots are coming out the bottom. Yeah. All right. Sharing again. Yeah, so I mentioned you can stick it into there, place in a nice and warm and humid area. You can use that plastic dome again.
So these would be all perlite only, or a mixture of.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like a hard and fast rule. You can use just perlite if you wanted to. People have done that successfully, but adding a bit of potting mix can help retain a bit more water if it's draining too quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and there you can see a rooted manzanita.
Wow.
Oh, that's a big root.
Yeah, they might not always be that big. Okay, now we can talk about divisions. So this is great for a lot of species that are spreading by underground stems or that are clumping, like irises, which we'll talk about, and rushes and sedges, as well as these other plants. And then there's also plants that produce little offsets, little bulblets or scales off their underground storage structures. So those can also be divided apart. So here's an example with the rush. You can see it's in a pot and it's formed this mass of roots. And with rush, they're really tolerant of just cutting of the roots and manipulation. So you can even cut off a huge section of root to help disentangle the little parts of the plant. And then you basically just chop it into little pieces, and then you can put each of those pieces into a new pot. Oops. Where's the iris? Stop real quick. Let's see here. Yeah, I don't think the new picture showed up. That's okay. All right. Okay, I think here we have it now. There we go. So Vivian and I earlier, we went to the patch of iris that's right outside this building. This has been growing here for like 10 years or so. So they're really in need of divisions. Irises love to be divided, and that actually encourages them to flower more. So if you divide them every 3 to 5 years, that will rejuvenate them. and they're really in need of division. And you can see here, we've taken out a chunk of iris, and that's all of this stuff right here. So you can get a lot of iris out if it's mature. And there's probably like 20 or 30 plants in here. It's crazy. So yeah, you basically just dig out the plant from the ground. And see Vivian is digging out the plant, and then I'm holding this chunk out. You can see, I'll lift this for you. There's a lot of healthy material here. So you can see that the irises, they grow outwards. And the older material dies back. So you can see this is some older roots that are not as fresh, and some of them are dying. But at the tips here, you can see there's a lot of like very healthy, thick white roots and new growth. Yeah, so you basically dig all that out, shake off some of the soil, and then you can cut this apart. So you want to make sure each section has at least some leaves and some roots. So I'm gonna first take off this part. This part might be able to separate some more. There we go. And yeah, you can cut off some of the older dead material and the older leaves as well. And iris leaves, they come out from the center. So this older material off to the side is kind of not really useful anymore, and cutting it off can help reduce rotting. And then this older roots, I might cut off as well and just keep that fresh growth. If y'all want, you can take these home with you. I think this is just Douglas iris, very beautiful iris, native to our coast. Some people also like to cut the leaves. If you have a lot of extra leaves, you can kind of chop off like a segment of it. And that, similar to the cuttings, can help reduce like the evaporative pressure of water stress on your plant. Yeah, this is good to go to put in a pot or even directly in the ground if you wanted to. And then you also want to do this when they're putting out new growth. So this is a tip that Vivian gave me. You'll want to look for that new fresh material, just because if you're doing it when they're still dormant, like late summer or something, not only is it really probably going to be pretty hot and stressful for them to divide at that time, they're also going to have not much new material, and then they're going to rot and die. Just that older material there. So yeah, doing this around now is a great time, just because they're starting to put that new growth out.
Is that red? Oh, yeah, is that an indication of new growth?
Yeah, that pink. That's a really great indicator.
When you plant those, how much goes below the soil?
Great question. So let me demonstrate in the next section actually on planting this. Let me share again. All right. So yeah, just briefly, you can see this is a plant with little offsets on it, little underground bulblets or scales. Here's another example. And a lot of plants like those native onions or Mariposa lilies and lilies as well. This is a lily plant. Have those underground mini plants that you can break off and put into a new pot. So yeah, in summary, a lot of plants can reproduce asexually, and we just do our best to provide those conditions for those cuttings and divisions to root and grow. So I'll talk about upsizing those plants and planting them into bigger containers. So let me stop sharing here. So for the irises, when you plant them in a bigger pot, you'll want to basically plant this right at the level of the soil. You don't want to bury that rhizome or the stem part too deep. It wants to be like just poking out of the soil. So let me get a pot. I'll do a little mini pot. You probably want to do a bigger pot, but I'm gonna do a smaller one to save on soil here. So this is the pot. I'm gonna fill it up. I'll leave a little bit of a lip, just not filling it up all the way so that when I water it, it can collect some water. So I filled it up about 2/3, and then I'm gonna put my plant in here. So I'm gonna the roots in, and you want that rhizome, that underground stem, to just be laying flat right below the soil surface, so you can see a little bit of it peeking out. I'm gonna continue filling. And you wanna shake, because when you go to water, the soil is gonna sink down. So if you tap it, like so, then it's gonna help that soil settle. And then it won't kind of sink down when you water as much. But you also don't want to press it down so hard that it becomes compacted, overly compacted. You want space for, you want that porosity to still exist, and space for your roots to grow. So I'm gonna make sure my rhizome is kind of just peeking out there. So you can see it's right below the soil surface. It's just barely peeking out that rhizome. And then, yeah, your new leaves should be growing. Let me cover this part a little bit more. And I've also left a little lip for watering. And if you do this in the ground, you'll just do a similar thing in your native soil. You can also do this with like a little seedling. So I'll just quickly demonstrate with a chopstick. You'll just want to pry out your seedlings from the flat, and just do your best to get all those roots out. So this is a Phacelia plant seedling. And some of the roots will break. A lot of plants, I'd say most plants are tolerant of some roots breaking. There's some species that are more sensitive, like milkweeds or lupins, but in general, it's fine if some of the roots break. So there I've got the root system on this little baby seedling. So it's basically a similar thing as what I've done for the iris. Let me get another pot. Here. So I'm gonna fill up halfway or so, and then hold my seedling in place while infilling around. I'm filling around the seedling and just lightly letting that soil settle in. And then you want that soil level to be right at the point where the roots and the leaves meet. So you don't want to expose any roots. Otherwise they'll dry out and die, but you also don't want to bury too deeply or they can rot. So yeah, just right at that soil, it's called the crown of the plant. And then water these in really well. Make sure you soak that whole soil column, especially during that early initial period when they're stressed out from being upsized. Yeah. So I think we are a little bit over time. Let me just quickly talk about taking care of your plants. So as I mentioned, you want to moderate your light and temperature using your shade cloth or your greenhouses, your mini greenhouses. If it's really cold and frosty and you have little baby plants, you can cover your plants with like a some kind of cloth to protect them during the night, from freezing. And then, yeah, you wanna water your plants pretty regularly, especially in the summer. You can let the top, inch or two dry out, but you don't want the whole soil column to completely dry out. Just because especially the potting mixes, they can get super dry and actually start repelling water. And then by that point, your plant will be dead. We found at our nursery that we don't have to fertilize too much just because our mix has that slow release fertilizer. But if you do find your plants are not really putting out a lot of new growth during the growing season, like in spring and summer, you can use a fertilizer like this fish emulsion that we sometimes use. This we just mix with water and water our plants with it. But you don't want to give them too much fertilizer either. That could cause them to have too much foliage that is not really supported by that root system inside the little pot. So, yeah, just keep it balanced. And then putting your plants in the ground, this is the best time to do so, November through February during the rainy season. Especially if you have like relatively smaller pots like we do. Yeah, and then you plant it so that the crown of the plant, as I mentioned, matches the level of the surrounding soil. And then really in those first few weeks, keep them watered really well so that they can get established. Yeah, and then for the first year, even I would continue watering, even though they are supposedly adapted to our local environment, they're not gonna be, especially when they're young, able to withstand those summer droughts. So yeah, keep them watered through their first year, sometimes even into the second, and then after that, they can kind of stop being watered regularly. Yeah, in summary, upsize your plants into larger containers or yeah, you can even do it directly into the ground if you're doing divisions for irises, things like that. And then install your plants during the rainy season. That's the best time of year to do so. And then finally, when your plants have matured, of course, you have a beautiful garden, you can close the loop and start propagating plants for your friends or sharing with the CNPS community. Yeah, if you'd like to learn more, here's some more of those resources that we mentioned earlier. And then our local organization, CNPS website, our website, and Indigenous tribes websites. And yeah, I want to thank you all for coming today. Feel free to come up if you want a little piece of iris to take home. I'll be cutting them up here. And also if you have questions, feel free to chat with me or discussion items. And yeah, I want to thank you all for coming. Thank you.